Tonight's the night. Hey, great to have you here. So today I'll be reviewing episode 4 of Dexter Resurrection. This episode was a little bit longer than the ones we've gotten thus far. We open up the episode with Dexter at Red's apartment, and we get some solid dialogue between him and Harry here and in this episode. Pretty much Harry warning Dexter to not accept this serial killer invitation intended for Red. We then cut over to Harrison, and he gets a call about the watch that the guy he killed, Ryan Foster, being repaired, and the show creators here go for a pretty artsy choice that follows Harrison throughout this episode, where he hears the watch seconds constantly ticking. We then cut to the episode title, which I did like a lot more in this one, with the skyline and blood red lettering. We then advance to Dexter, who's now meeting up with Charley to attend this serial killer party. It's a kind of funny moment here where he tries to get in the back seat and she tells him to sit up front because he's obviously playing as this guy who kills Uber drivers from the back seat. And this won't be the last time that Dexter really has to adjust to his new persona as Red. They get over to her boss, Leon Prater's estate, and Dexter winds up using Red's fingerprint to enter the elevator. At first, it doesn't really work, but after wiping it off a bit, he eventually is granted access to the elevator. And I'll say I'm a bit hit or miss on the music choices for this season. I mostly like them, but for example, the music played here in the elevator was not a great choice in my opinion. Once they exit the elevator, Dexter's then met with Leon Prater, played by Peter Dinklage, and he's this charismatic, wealthy, and well-known character, and one of his passions is collecting serial killer memorabilia. At first, it's pitched as just being kind of trophies, but there's also just weapons and apparel, so it seems like this guy collects a bit of everything when it comes to serial killers. And it's kind of a cool set piece where he's showing Dexter all of his stuff almost like it's a museum. And then in pretty quick succession, we're shown Trinity's hammer, Dexter's Bay Harbor Butcher blood slides, and the table that Dexter killed the ice truck killer on. And while these are fun reminders of the original series, this seemed a bit awfully convenient that he'd have all three of these for us to see. For example, I'm not really sure how big the ice truck killer was nationwide, but to me it just kind of seemed like we're being beaten over the head with all these Easter eggs, only 4 episodes in thus far. And don't get me wrong, I love callbacks to a show I love, but we've already gotten cameos from Trinity, Miguel, Dokes, Quinn, Masuka. It just seems like it's a little bit too early to have all this stuff happening at once. Dexter is then slowly introduced to our cast of 4 other serial killers at this party, and as expected, Lady Vengeance, played by Kristen Ritter, is who Dexter seems like he's probably going to get close to throughout this season, maybe as a love interest. Eric Stonestreet as Rapunzel seemed fine. It was a little bit weird though when Dexter is so surprised that Rapunzel balances a family life with killing. It's literally a page out of the Trinity playbook, so I'm not really sure why that shocked him. Neil Patrick Harris as this tattoo killer, I didn't like as much. His accent seemed like it was a bit all over the place, bouncing in and out here and there. And David Dastmalchian as the Gemini killer, we haven't really been shown enough of at this point. We then briefly shift over to Batista, who winds up finding the apartment tied to Dexter's car, and it's Harrison's friend, so Batista then heads to the hotel to find Harrison. And then back with Dexter at this party, he has this balance of being both weirded out by this group, but also feeling somewhat right at home. And apparently Red, the character that Dexter's pretending to be, is a vegan, so we get some pretty good comedic moments here of Dexter's disappointment whenever these people present food to him. Neil Patrick Harris's character Lowell then puts on a presentation of his upcoming planned kill, so at this point, Dexter knows that he's going to kill again pretty soon. And then back over with Harrison at the hotel, Batista is now there and calls him out, kind of surprising that Batista recognized Harrison. He winds up also telling him, "The last time I saw you was your 4th birthday, I gave you the red train set," obviously a nod to Dexter playing the character Red in this episode. But here I also thought in New Blood, Batista barely remembered Harrison's name and needed this big dramatic scene when he finally could remember it, but now he suddenly remembers everything about him and his birthday and all that kind of stuff. I don't totally buy that.
He had a little son. Oh yeah, Harrison.
And as they're talking, Harrison mentions that Dexter's dead, and Batista doesn't wind up correcting him here. I think he wants to try to gather more information first. And hearing the scene, Batista's grilling Harrison pretty hard about Dexter being the Bay Harbor Butcher, and Harrison doesn't wind up saying much here, and they both part ways for now. These drama scenes I'll say are fun, but I know since we're only 4 episodes into the season, they're kind of just going to be teases at this point. It was also super weird when Harrison winds up walking away. His co-worker then goes up Batista after seeing that he has a badge and brings up Ryan Foster, this guy that Harrison killed, and she winds up defending Harrison while also heavily incriminating him here. That part felt a little bit inorganic to me, just to help Batista connect with Detective Wallace. We do wind up getting some backstory on Lady Vengeance. Seems like she kills people who sexually assaulted others, like her mom's boyfriend, who did so to her sister, and this somewhat links her to Dexter as people who do bad things to bad people with somewhat good intentions. And as a group, there's a pretty cringy scene where all 5 killers have their own wording for what drives them to kill. They all wind up saying their own phrases, which ends with Dexter saying, "the urge." And conveniently after leaving, Dexter winds up seeing this big billboard with Leon Prater on it, highlighting that this guy's pretty big across the board. We do also have Dexter grab a couple chili dogs here, once again doing the overeating thing, especially since he couldn't indulge at that party. We also get one of a few moments in this episode where Dexter appears pretty human, where he's outside of his apartment and he realizes that Blessing and his family are great people, they're just not his kind of people. Then we shift over to Harrison, who's now with his coworker since he doesn't want to be alone for now. She wants him to stay the night, and he kind of misreads things and tries to kiss her. It gets super awkward, so he winds up storming off out of there. The next morning, Dexter is outside of the hotel stalking Harrison, and he winds up calling Lowell to set up time to meet, since he's afraid of him killing soon. He then also heads over to the park to jog with Lady Vengeance. They wind up talking for a little bit, and she invites him over. She tries to get him to take a shower with her, but he realizes he needs to head out and meet up with Lowell, so he winds up taking off. And this part was also kind of odd for me. We don't know much about Lady Vengeance yet, but her character is supposed to take out these sexual predators, but she just met Dexter, aka Red, and she immediately wants to get intimate with him, which is obviously okay, but a little bit strange dichotomy of moving that quickly with that kind of backstory. And while at her place, Dexter's also once again given some vegan food with this pastry that makes the most bizarre sound effect ever when he winds up cutting into it, similar to that weird chomp that we got in the original Sin opening. Dexter then heads to that happy hour with Lowell, and he realizes that Lowell's now stalking his prey actually, and even says, "Tonight's the night, baby." So at this point, Dexter knows he needs to act fast if he's going to stop Lowell from killing this random girl who just happens to be getting a tattoo that Lowell likes to collect. Although we have Dexter realize he needs to go home and get his tools, and we get another jab at New York City here, kind of like the parking earlier in the season, where he realizes that traffic completely sucks. We then pivot over to Detective Wallace, who's working on the Ryan Foster murder case, the guy that Harrison killed, and she's seemingly pretty obsessed with it, and her partner's kind of saying, "Hey, chill out here." But then we get Batista, who shows up and wants to chat with her. Then back with Dexter, he winds up knocking out Lowell with his own anesthetic gas that he was going to use on his victim, and then we cut to Lowell, now on Dexter's kill table. And this was probably one of the better parts of the episode for me, with the dialogue exchange between Dexter and Lowell. Neil Patrick Harris really isn't afraid of dying like most people, since he knows how this goes. Although he does let out a scream right before he learns that Dexter's the Bay Harbor Butcher. Here we also have Dexter return to taking blood from his victims. I guess he was pretty fascinated with and surrounded by all these trophies so much this episode that he just can't help himself, except he winds up just using some pieces of glass in the room there, so I don't know if he actually winds up keeping that or not. And here it makes a lot of sense why Neil Patrick Harris hasn't really been one of the new cast members on this whole public tour of Dexter Resurrection being out, because this should be the only episode that he's in, because Dexter takes him out here. Dexter does wind up having another human vulnerable moment here in the car. He's talking with Harry, and he tells him that he's truly scared if Harrison would rather have him be dead. And now back with Harrison, Batista shows up to the hotel again, this time talking about Ryan Foster, the guy that Harrison killed. And in this conversation, Batista's referencing that Ryan was cut up into 9 pieces, just like what the Bay Harbor Butcher did. And it's weird that once again this is a connection between the Bay Harbor Butcher and this specific kill. I still stand by, if it was really that unique, this mastermind Detective Wallace would have made that connection between the Bay Harbor Butcher and this kill even without Batista. And in this conversation, Batista definitely insinuates that Harrison killed Ryan by saying that the crime scene was cleaned up by an expert or someone who was taught by an expert. We do get kind of a weird comment by Batista here where he says that Dexter wasn't a dark Avenger who killed bad people. A lot of innocent people died because of him, such as Maria, Deb, and Rita, which is true in some ways, but I don't know how Batista would associate that with Dexter, since none of those people were cut up. I guess because mass murderers were accused of killing each of those 3, he assumes that Dexter had some involvement that led to it. Harrison winds up walking away from that conversation and then starts freaking out, having the ticking happen again in his head. He winds up trying to call Detective Wallace and confessing, but she doesn't answer her phone. He then heads over to the police precinct and plans to turn himself in. Just before doing so, Dexter winds up grabbing him on the back and telling him not to do it. And that closes out the episode, a bit on a cliffhanger. So now Dexter has finally met face to face with Harrison, and we'll see where things head next for them. I do wonder if Prater knows who Dexter actually is. If not, it's a little bit weird that Dexter was shown 3 in a row references to his kills. I don't know if we assumed that he was shown more of those off screen, but it just seemed a little bit too perfect and forced for me. I do also kind of assume if Prater was this big of a fanatic, he would recognize Dexter as being tied to Trinity through Rita, the Ice Straw Killer through Brian, and the Bay Harbor Butcher through Dokes. And while watching that scene play out between Dexter and Prater, it definitely made me think of the kill memorabilia used in Scream 6, like the TV that fell on Stu's head. So for an overall episode rating here, this may shock you, but I'm gonna go with a neutral rating. I will say it's a high neutral, and probably my second favorite episode thus far. I have heard a lot of hype and high praise for this episode, so maybe I'm being a bit of a Debbie Downer here. Don't get me wrong, it had some really great moments throughout the episode, but I thought at times it's treating us as the audience a little bit too much as fans dying for nostalgic references. But what do you think? Did you love this episode? Where do you think we're headed next? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.